Davina, over to you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. We at Say Cheese are very happy to have you all here. So, I'm just going to talk about Say Cheese a little bit. So, Say Cheese is India's first platform focused on women's happiness, and we help solve challenges in their career, relationship, and health by offering personalized and holistic solutions. So we'll just play a short video now introducing Say Cheese and our work.
Are you truly happy with your life?
I'm blessed to have reached where I am today, but it's neither easy getting here nor being a female CFO. Besides that, I have to work harder than my peers to prove myself. So, as a result, my health and my family life take a backseat.
First, I had to change my job when I got married. Then, I had to completely leave the corporate world when my daughter was born.
I landed a great job right after MBA, and it's been an exciting 2 years. But now family pressure is increasing on me to settle down.
That's a good question. Let me think about it.
How do you overcome these challenges?
I tried aerobics on my own for a month, but it's impossible to balance everything. I find it difficult to sustain.
I don't know where to start. I've heard that a coach can help find a solution. But where do I get a trusted and experienced coach?
I wish someone could help me with the solution that works for me and helps relieve that pressure.
Women are brought up in an environment where they think about others' happiness. Guess now it's time to think about my happiness. It's never too late to get started.
These are real stories. Across the country, millions of women, including me, have had our happiness impacted by issues where our health, relationships, and career aspirations are compromised. It is not time for despair or self pity. Rather, it is time to take charge of your life and your happiness. It is time to look within, to connect with your deeper purpose, and start your happiness journey. It is time to say cheese. Say Cheese is the first women happiness platform focused on providing personalized and holistic solutions to help solve real challenges women face. Let's make the world a happier place, one woman at a time, together. Come join our community now.
I hope you all liked the video. So when a user registers with us, we do a detailed happiness evaluation where elements that determine your happiness are measured, and after we guide the user through coaching and others towards their goals. We started about 2 months ago, and now we're touching our users for that is a happiness evaluation and a webinar from which we've had a very encouraging response. So our brief is a month-long activity webinar in various topics that resemble knowledge, skill, and enhancement to women. We have industry experts speaking on various topics, and we encourage women to take advantage of this and attend the webinar every weekend. Today's masterclass is being held in collaboration with Digit to provide best advice, reviews, and news in technology. Digit is always shown to be one of the most read technology magazines in India. higher than even the combined readership of its peers. We are very lucky to have them as our technology partner at Say Cheese. This session will be led by legendary editor Samin Mittal. He has edited for the last 5 years, was a writer and reviewer for them before that as well. And he's also worked at NDTV as a producer of the technology shows. He completed his MBA from the University of Pune in 2009 and went on to a journalism. A huge check into CT is also known for his gaming and occasionally delves into fantasy novels. So, Mr. Minta, it's an honor to have you with us, and without further ado, I request you to begin.
Thanks, Divina, for that. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. And for all those that are watching, if you guys have any questions during the course of the presentation, please feel free to drop in the questions in the comments or just, raise it up. We'll do our best to answer them. I'd like to keep this as interactive as possible. And of course, our topic for today is about online payments, and this is consider this as a 101 for your online payments, the do's, the don'ts, what you can do, can't do. This will be really basic. Maybe some of the things I say could be things that you're already aware of. So in that case, if you want me to step it up a notch and maybe have questions about things that you aren't aware of, just drop it in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer it out here. I'm just going to share my screen so you see a little more than just me out here. And if you can give me 1 second, I'm just going to get it up and running. Sorry, just give me 1 second.
Sure, Samir.
Okay, can you guys see the presentation on the screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So we are, of course, going to talk about the different methods available with online payment. So let's just start with the basics of what exactly is an online payment and who can make them. At least when I was growing up, it was always the concept of you had to have cash in hand. You had to go to your grocery shop to buy things. If you went to a shop to buy clothes, you had to carry enough cash. For anything, you had to have cash in hand. And of course, with the advancements of technology, we've come to a point where it's called plastic money right now, where you have things like your credit card, your debit card, you have various other methods of online payments like bank transfers. You even have something that came into effect a few years ago, which was called UPI, and UPI payments has now picked up. You have apps like Google Pay, you have Paytm, you have Phone Pay. You have a lot of different avenues of payments that you can make online today. And with these growing avenues of payments, you not only have more options to choose from, but it also comes with its own set of challenges and risks. So put simply, online payment is essentially your ability to pay without actually having cash in hand using all these different methods. So what payments can you make online? That's one of the questions that comes to mind. And I think a great example of this happened when demonetization hit us a couple of years ago, and everybody needed to find alternative ways. That's when we saw the rise of apps like Paytm. We saw things like Phone Pay come in. We saw a lot of different avenues, and you could pay everything from your electricity bills to your phone bills to your gas bills, your grocery bills. You could go shopping. the avenues of the types of payments that one could make online just started exploding, right? So if you can think of any one topic, even to an extent, if your domestic help at home has a bank account, you can even transfer their salaries via one of these methods online. So that is the scope of online and digital payments that has happened. It is probably very few scenarios where you can't make an online payment, to the point where, and this is a great example to show you that you don't need to be connected online, is you could get your debit card or your credit card to have something called as an offline payment. So when you're in the skies in a plane, if you're traveling and you want to purchase food, you can use your card, but you actually have to get it registered to have offline payments. And you can actually use that card in a flight where there's no network to make a payment. So that is the depth and the extent to which payments can be made. Once again, I want you guys to know that you can drop in questions at any point, and the host will ping me and just read out the question to me so we can answer that as we're going along, because I'm pretty sure some question would come to your mind. Please feel free to ask any question, and even if you need me to repeat any point that I've made, I'm more than happy to do so. So now that you know that everything that you can pay for happens online, the biggest question that comes to mind is, how do I do this? What are the modes of these bill payments that I can have online? So I have a couple of images out here, which I think can be most related with all of you that have delved into the world of online shopping. Screen from Paytm is, of course, the easiest. You can literally scan the QR code at your local grocery shop and make the payment. Amazon or Flipkart or any of the online e-commerce websites is also a great example that offer you multiple modes of payment, be it through your credit card or debit card, or through net banking, through online transfers, or even cash on delivery, which you could pay using a QR code or using a UPI based app. Of course, unified payments interface, which is what UPI is the newest and the youngest form of digital payments that we have seen enter the Indian market. UPI has taken, a great precedence in the past couple of months, in the past couple of years, where people are generating UPI IDs, they're linking it with their bank account. And this comes with its own set of challenges and its own set of advantages, because UPI, being a newer form of payment, is generating a lot of questions in the minds of users. Because when you look at making payments online through your debit and credit card, it's as easy as inputting the numbers that are on your card and waiting for an OTP to pop up, right? So let's try and understand what UPI is, because this is the newest and the youngest form, and a lot of people have a lot of questions about it. Now, as you can see from this image, UPI is a unified payments interface, but you have a variety of apps that can use this. It is linked to your bank account. So let's take this for example. You have an app like Paytm. You have Bheem is the own UPI app itself. You have Google Pay, you have Amazon Pay, even WhatsApp. You can link your UPI ID to WhatsApp to send money. So let's say if a family member or a friend is in need of money and you need to send it to them immediately, all you need to do is take out your phone, open one of these apps, which could be Paytm, it could be Google Pay. Just enter the person's phone number, because your UPI ID is linked to your bank account, and it is also linked to the phone number that you have with your bank account. So it's very easy to simply open one of these apps, input the person's phone number who you want to send this money to, and transfer it. So gone are the days where you actually have to go to the bank and get this done, or to do it online. Yes, online banking is still there, it's still safe for larger transactions, but UPI has kind of made things very convenient. I mean, from a day-to-day example of me going to the grocery shop in the morning to buy milk, bread, eggs, it's no longer the state of I have my wallet with me, or I forgot my wallet with me, so do I need to build up credit with this guy to pay him tomorrow? No, as long as I have my phone, and the shop is accepting UPI payments, which in today's day and age a majority of all these shops accept it, you don't need to carry your wallet with you. You can simply scan the code using any of these apps. Now you might think that the shopkeeper has a QR code with a Phone Pay logo on it, or he has a QR code with a Google Pay logo on it, but you have it, you have a Paytm app on your phone. So is there going to be any problem with the cross linking of these things? And the answer to that really is no, because your UPI ID that you have on your phone is linked with your bank account, and the same is the case with the person who is showing you the QR code that you are going to scan in your shop. So because it is a bank to bank link, the transfer is from your bank account to the other person's bank account. It really doesn't matter if you are on the same app or not, so long as you are using UPI as a form of payment. Remember, all these apps support UPI as a form of payment, but if you are going to use the app's own payment, like Paytm has its wallet where you can recharge with a certain amount of money, then that kind of complicates things, which is why UPI is a method of unifying it, right? That's the first word in UPI, is to unify a payments platform, giving you access to various forms of apps that you can actually use. Any questions so far up to this point? Do we have any questions on anything?
We have a couple of questions in the chat box. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So some of the questions are: is there an extra cost incurred on payments online?
So the cost of payments online, if you are going to shop on any website like Amazon or Flipkart or Myntra or any of these, there is no cost involved if you are using your debit card or your credit card or net banking as a mode of payment. However, if you convert your credit card payment into an EMI, which is your easy monthly installments, you are going to have to pay interest to your bank based on their charges. So if, let's say, tomorrow you log on to Amazon and you want to buy a sofa set, or let's say a DVD player which costs you 5,000 rupees, you will always see a little box over there which says EMI. When you click on it, it's going to give you different options of EMIs which are available based on the bank account. So let's say ICICI will have a rate of interest of 12% and Standard Chartered will give you something different. There are times when you will see a no cost EMI. Usually this is a tie-up between the seller and the service provider. So in the case of Amazon, they have a tie-up with ICICI Bank, and you have the Amazon Pay ICICI Bank credit card. And if you shop using that card and you convert your payment into an EMI, then you're waiving off the interest. That is one of the perks as to how they get you to take that card, right? But as a general charge, you are charged when you pay for more expensive appliances offline. So let's say tomorrow you go to a shop and you want to buy something that has been imported. So if you go to an Apple shop and you buy a laptop, or you go to a Dell store and you buy a laptop, whatever is the MRP, let's say it's 90,000 rupees or 50,000 rupees for the laptop, you can swipe your card and purchase that product. There are some shops which will tell you that, hey, because this is an imported device, we will charge you a service charge of 2.5% or a very nominal charge, but that is very limited. It's in very select places, it's in very select shops, and it's not going to interfere with you if you are shopping online. So if you're going to shop from Amazon, from Flipkart, from Myntra, from any of the big online retailers, even if you are going to use services like Paytm and Google Pay to shop for things, you are going to pay no charge. The MRP of the product that you see is the amount of money that's going to get deducted from your account or get added to your credit card bill when you make the payment.
So the next question is there a transaction limit or can I put a limit?
That's a great question. Now, for your transaction limit is generally
Okay,
put
thank you.
by the
If,
sorry, Divina, were you saying something?
sorry, there was the second question I
Hmm.
had. Is there a transaction limit or can I put a limit?
Yeah. So, yeah, question about transaction limit. Yeah. So that's a great question. Now, the transaction limit is usually automatically put by a bank on your debit card and your credit card. So when you go and apply for a credit card, it is going to tell you that the limit for this credit card is, say, 50,000 rupees or 60,000 rupees. You are given that information from your bank, or you could simply just call up the bank's helpline number and understand the limits of your credit card. If you need that limit to be increased, there are certain criterias you need to fulfill, which is something called as a credit score. A credit score is built when you use your credit card often and you pay it back in time. So like this is a very personal example. To build a healthy credit score, I know that I spend about 4 to 5 thousand rupees a month on petrol for my car because I commute to work, this that. So I always, fill fuel in my car using my credit card, and at the end of the week or the end of the month, I pay it off immediately. So when you pay off your credit card immediately, you are building a healthy credit score. On your debit card also there is a limit, and this limit you may not know upfront when you open your bank account or when you get your debit card, but it is always advisable to call up your bank and ask them what is your limit. Usually the limit is about 90,000 rupees or 1 lakh rupees on a debit card. That's usually how much it is, but you can go to your bank and tell them, hey, I need to reduce this per transaction. The limit which is hard set is on your ATM withdrawal, which is if you are not using the same ATM of your bank. So let's say I have an ICICI bank account. I can withdraw from an ICICI ATM up to the limit which I have set with my bank. But if I go to a Standard Chartered ATM or a State Bank of India ATM, I can only withdraw 10,000 rupees at a time. I can withdraw 10,000 rupees multiple times if I need more cash, but that is a hard limit set with an interbank usage of an ATM machine. So the short answer is yes, you can go and set a limit with your bank. It is advisable for you to go and set a limit with your bank, simply because it's helpful in cases of, let's say, your debit card is cloned or you have faced some fraud. Then the person who has access to your data can only withdraw limited amounts of money, either from the ATM or an online transaction.
Thank you, Samir, for that. So there is another question: how to prevent misuse? What if my SIM is cloned?
If your SIM is cloned. Okay, so I'm going to answer a few more questions which are surrounded with your SIM getting cloned. So first of all, you should and always know that your phone is something that you need to keep with you. You should not click on any unknown SMS. Usually there are a lot of phishing related activities which take place, and what phishing is essentially trying to hook you in. It's literally the meaning of the word phishing, but spelling is different. You'll get a link on your phone which says, click on this link and you'll win 50,000 rupees, or click on this link and you're probably going to get a holiday somewhere. You may even get something which looks like a legitimate link saying your friend has sent you a link on Facebook, but the spelling of Facebook might be a little different. The URL which you click on might look a little funny. So the first thing is stay away from any form of clicking on any link that's unknown. When someone needs to, if you come, you will only come to know that your SIM has been cloned once a transaction has happened, or you cannot get through a call, or someone cannot get through to you. That's one of the disadvantages. However, the safest way is don't let anyone touch your phone, don't let anyone touch your SIM card, do not click on any unknown links. Even if a friend of mine sends me a link on an email and says, hey, this is a funny video I found online and I want you to see it, I will either call him up or drop him an SMS and say, hey, did you send me this link? Is it safe to click on it? If you go and look at all the fraudulent transactions that have taken place, it always starts at a point of a human error, where you have given your card and it has been swiped in a machine that can clone your debit card, and the person that is cloning it has seen your PIN. In India, of course, it is a strict rule to have a PIN with your cards and an OTP when you're making an online transaction. In a country like the US, they don't want that. They just want to swipe their card. So the rate of frauds in a country like the US is much higher. In India, however, because of things like a PIN and OTP, you are slightly more secure. So when your SIM is cloned, it's going to be very difficult for you to find out unless you're going to try to make a call or receive a message. The best way and the best thing to do when you know that your SIM is cloned is call your service provider and tell them to block that number, and you need to file a complaint to the police as well. When it happens with your debit card, you will get a message, so this is again a personal example where I went to a shop and I made a payment with my card, and 3 days later there was a transaction of 10,000 rupees withdrawn from my account, which wasn't me. So my debit card was cloned at the shop that I had gone to. So in this case, I had to call up the bank. The bank had to block my card. I had to give them all the details of my transactions. They had to verify where I was at the time of the transaction and where I was post the transaction. I even had to make an online fraud FIR, which is kind of an easy process. The bank helped me go through that process. They refunded my money and they said, this is a temporary return of your 10,000 rupees because we need to verify whether this was an actually a fraudulent activity or, was I lying? And it was about a 3-month process for them to, go through and figure out and investigate this process. And after 3 months, I got a call saying, hey, you were right. It was a fraudulent transaction. We have verified that. And, we've returned your 10,000 rupees. Banks are usually insured for a certain amount of return for frauds for their customers, but it is still advisable for you to be very, very safe when you are doing any form of online transactions. The things to be careful about are things that you've probably already heard of. Do not share your PIN with anyone. Do not share your OTP with anyone. No one is going to ask you for any details which are private. So if someone needs to transfer money online to you, all they need is your name, your bank account number, and your IFSC code. No form of transaction password or your bank account passwords are needed for this. This kind of information is very personal. If you are not sure of what kind of information you should or should not share, the simplest thing is to walk into your bank branch, because they will advise you correctly, or call up the helpline number that you have to get the information that, hey, someone's asking me for this information. Is it okay for me to share them? 99% of the time, you are not supposed to share any of this information with anyone unless you are receiving money, which is when you need to just give them your bank account number and your IFSC code. Or if you're doing it through a service like a UPI payment, all they need to know is your phone number and nothing else. So when somebody comes, like my dry cleaner comes to collect money from the dry cleaning, he'll give me a mobile number and I will open an app like Paytm and I'll enter that and I'll make the payment, and he'll call me and tell me when he's received the money. So when your SIM is cloned, you are not going to immediately know it's happened, because you will have to wait to use your phone. You will have to wait to see an SMS. Any cellular related activity is what you will have to look out for. And your phone's just lying on the side, right? You're not going to really look at it all the time. So you have to be very careful about this.
Thank you, Sameer, for such a detailed answer. I'm sure a lot of questions, might have been answered. All of us are extremely concerned about the safety measures, especially with online payments. So there is another question related to internet banking, which is difference between UPI and payments bank. So could you highlight a few points on that?
Sure. So UPI is actually related to your bank account. So when you open a UPI ID, you have to create what is called, I will just give you the exact name of the thing. You have to create a UPI ID, which is based on your name at the rate, the service that you have, right? So when you create a UPI ID, the payment is linked to your bank account. You can have multiple bank accounts linked to one UPI ID. However, that is not advisable, because the transaction will always happen, which is with your primary bank account. So UPI is a new form of payment, which is related to the convenience of payment. It is, excuse me, it is linked to your bank account via one of these apps. So let's say if you use Paytm to create a UPI ID, you are going to use either your phone number at the rate Paytm or your name. So for me, it could be Sameer at the rate Paytm, and I could simply give you that ID to make a payment to me, or I could give you my phone number at the rate Paytm based on what I have created. So UPI is a new form of linking your bank account to an application like Paytm, PhonePe, Google Pay, so that you can make the transaction directly without having to open the bank app, without having to go through the process of inputting your bank details, exchanging that information. It is the convenience that UPI brings which distinguishes it from other services.
Okay. Also, something related to UPI is UPI safe enough?
So, like I said before with the SIM cloning answer, the safety of the app, the first step to the error is 99% of the time a human error, right? Because the app is only going to work when you input your username and password. Now, when it comes to UPI, when you open the application, let's say I open the app Paytm, and on the top left corner, I click on the button which says pay. It's going to give me that little box of a QR code, right? Now, if I'm at a shop, I'm going to scan the QR code. Once I've scanned the code, it is going to ask me for my UPI password, which I set when I made my UPI account. That could be a 4-digit or a 6-digit PIN code. It's just like the PIN code that you set up on your phone, right, for security. Now, that is where the vulnerability lies. So if someone's standing in front of me and they see me input my PIN code, they know what it is. So all they need is access to my phone and the app. And if they can open the app and they know my PIN code, they can make the transaction. So once I've scanned the code, I don't necessarily need to be close to the shopkeeper or close to people around me. I can simply take a step back, cover it just like you would when you're entering your PIN code at an ATM machine, enter your passcode, and you're set. You do not need to share this information with anyone. Your mobile number that will get any form of information also does not need to be shared with anyone. So UPI is a safe form of transaction unless somebody has the information they need to access the data on your phone. A lot of times for convenience, your phone's PIN code and the PIN code of your UPI ID could be the same thing just for convenience. It could be your birth year, it could be a spouse's birthday, it could be a special day in your life because these are numeric combinations, right? It could be any of these things. So one more piece of advice is keep your pins separate. It is difficult to remember to keep, phone pin separate, your ATM pin separate, your UPI pin separate, but it is advisable to do so. It is also advisable to change this pin as often as you deem convenient. So once in 15 days, once in a month. This is another layer of security that you're giving yourself. So if someone saw your pin a week ago, if they try to use it and you've changed it, you're safe. So a 15-day 1 month period is the best way to ensure that you are changing your pin often enough, so even if someone has seen it, they can't use it in the future. Another thing, and a lot of people who have been doing a lot of online transactions have started catering to this as a point of safety, is to maintain a separate bank account for your online transactions. So let's say, for example, your salary per month is 50,000 rupees and you have an account which gets your salary, but your expenses for your household are just 20,000 rupees, 30,000 rupees you're keeping as a safety net for anything. It's advisable to open a second bank account, transfer that 20,000 rupees into your new bank account, and link that bank account with your online payments, with your UPI payments, with any form of payments that you're going to make, simply because if that account is compromised, the bigger corpus of your savings in a bank account is still secure and kept in an account which is very seldom used for any form of transaction, right? So you're just transferring from one bank account to another bank account yourself, and that bank account which has the smaller sum of money is being used to make your online payments. And from experience, I can tell you that's also a great way to inculcate the habit of saving and knowing exactly where your expenditures lie. And this is kind of a very good layer of security, because the bank account, the example that I gave you earlier of mine, the reason the person could only withdraw 10,000 rupees was because that account had only 10,000 rupees in it. So had I linked my UPI payment, my debit card payments, my online payments to my account, which has my salary that comes in every month, my savings that are there, he would have been able to get away with a lot more money. So these are just a few things to keep in mind and ensure that you as the human form of error are safe, because these apps are generally quite secure. It's very difficult for someone to hack into this app. They usually need the most basic information, which is your username and password, to get in.
I think I pretty much agree with the explanation. I understand when you say that, human errors are a way, where we can actually like let someone commit a fraud or something like that, which I totally agree to. And like you said, that we should keep changing our MPINs or the security code every 15 days to 1 month. And nowadays, even these apps have started using the face identity feature, which is even more better because it allows us to have more security. So thank you for
Absolutely.
that explanation. So there is another question. So the question is, when I pay my daughter's school fee, using
Mhm.
Paytm, there is a service charge. Is that normal? And does it vary from one service provider to another?
Yeah, so like I had said a couple of questions ago, right? Like there are certain things which will deem a service charge that needs to be put, and the school fees payment could be one of these service charges. That there are way too many forms of service charges that are applied. So if you go to a restaurant and you have food and you scan a code and pay a bill, you will not be charged an extra service charge for that. But you will also probably not be charged if you are paying utility bills online, be it your phone bill. But yes, there are a certain list of charges like your your child's fees on if you pay that through Paytm, and it is disclosed that it is a service charge. You can always go. Sometimes it is also called as a convenience charge because you are paying for the convenience of not having to go through a different longer term process. And for a lot of payments, there is a list that you can find online. But if you are not confident that the service charge is legitimate, you can always go to the source and ask the school, for example, saying, hey, can you explain to me why this service charge is added? They will give you an explanation for it. And if there is a mode of payment where you don't need to get charged the service charge, they will tell you that it could be depositing it via a check, it could be a direct bank transfer that could save you this. But the convenience charge or the service charge is applicable for a large list of payments. uh, I'll actually have to look up the whole list to be able to explain to you which ones are and not there. But the best way is to go to the source and ask them that this is a convenience charge or a service charge that I was charged. Can you explain why it happened? And they usually do have an explanation for that.
Thank you, Samir. I think that pretty much answers the question. The other question is OTP makes the process difficult and slow. Is there a way around?
In India, unfortunately, there is no way around the OTP. It is primarily because of security. Now, internationally, there are a lot of countries that give you the option for an OTP. A lot of times, if you're someone that's traveled internationally pre-pandemic, you will know that when you made a transaction using a credit card of a particular bank, it would not ask you for your password or your PIN code. You would make a transaction using your debit card, for example, and it would ask you your PIN. Similarly, if you did this in an international environment, you were probably allowed to make an online transaction without using your OTP. But in India, it is primarily because of the security reasons why it is mandated for you to have an OTP to make the payment. And I can tell you it's an inconvenience of maybe a minute or two where you don't have network and you're moving your phone around to get that OTP to come. But it is definitely the most secure way of making a transaction, because if someone has your card number, they have your CVV code, they have your expiry date, the only thing they're lacking is the OTP, because they essentially have every piece of information that's available on the plastic card. So if tomorrow I have your card for 1 minute, I can click a photo of it and then probably go and do 10 transactions if the OTP did not exist. So while the inconvenience of that is there, the security of it is the reason why frauds in India related to debit cards are lower when it comes to card related frauds when in a country like US, for example, where cloning a card is a lot easier because they don't have the requirement of OTP. So it's inconvenient, but it's important.
I totally agree with you, Samir, on this. OTP is a very important feature that is required, especially while we are doing online transactions. So thank you for that. I'm registered on Google Pay,
Hmm.
but what if the person I need to pay is not registered on Google Pay but Paytm? How can I do a transfer? Is it possible?
Yes, it is possible, provided both of you have. Now, see, Google Pay is using UPI only. So, as a sender, you are fine. But the receiver of the money who has the Paytm account, you need to understand if that person has a UPI ID or is he using Paytm money. Now, for using Paytm money, you don't need to have a UPI ID. You could just upload, transfer money from your account into Paytm as a virtual wallet, so to speak. In that case, you cannot transfer money from Google Pay to Paytm. However, if the person that has Paytm has a registered UPI ID, it would be that person's name at the rate Paytm, or that person's phone number at the rate Paytm, or whatever is the UPI unique ID that the person has created. So you have to ask that person for his UPI ID, enter that into Google Pay, and then you should be able to make the transfer, which is between two different apps.
Okay, thank you, Samir. I think that pretty much we have answered all the questions. We have a compliment for you. Great explanation, detailed and in a simple language. Compliments. So thank
Thank you
you,
so
Samir.
much.
Thank you so much for answering all the questions. I just want to request if you could highlight one or two frauds that have taken place, and if you could learn something from them. So, if you could highlight a few live incidents.
Okay, so I'll start with something that's simple, and then that's something that went a little more complicated. So the simplest one was, again, this is a personal experience. I was at the bank for some work, and a person in front of me was talking to the person at the counter saying, I gave that person the OTP that came. What did I do wrong? Okay, so like we've covered in all these past few questions, things like your password, things like your OTP, things like information about your credit debit card, which are not publicly needed for making a transaction, should never be shared. Also, any password that you have, be it your bank account password, your ATM pin, this should be changed regularly. Like I gave you my personal example, I swiped my card at a shop. That machine probably had the ability to clone a card, and he saw me enter my pin, right? Because the machine didn't have the little borders around it where it could hide my finger, and he got access to my ATM pin. I'm sure you guys have probably seen on the news as well that there's a little extra cover on top of the ATM machine where you insert your card. It shouldn't be bulkier than needed. You can always ask the security guard that sits outside the ATM to tug at the little slot where you put your card in, because sometimes people might put an external fake reader on top. So the minute you swipe your card in, the little magnetic strip at the back of the card gets copied, and someone may have installed a small camera, or maybe just standing around to look at what you enter as your PIN. So also, if you get a link online which says, refresh your bank account details here, you should never click on that. The bank is never going to ask you to refresh your details. The bank usually gives you a warning when you open your app or you log in saying, please change your password, or it will log you out saying you haven't changed your password for 15 days or 1 month. So please go through the process of entering a new password. These are some of the examples of how a fraud can take place. Do not click on any link. There are so many times where you'll get an email which says Amazon has given you 500 rupees gift card. Please click on this link to access it. If you haven't done anything to get a gift card from Amazon, do not click on that link, because 99% of these phishing activities that take place through emails, WhatsApp, and SMSs are based on very popular links, be it Facebook, Amazon, Flipkart, or any other service that you may have used. Another thing is, someone will call you up from the bank and say, we are offering you a new debit or credit card. Please give us this information. Do not. No bank that's offering you a credit card will ask you for your card details, your bank account details, because they already have that information. And when you talk to your bank representative, they usually do a security check to know if it's you. This could be something like a question that is there, like, what was your first job, or, the first car brand, or a specific transaction that, will lead the bank person to know that it really is you. So you have to be really careful when you have these conversations. And like I said, the smartest way to avoid all this is have that secondary bank account which you use for, your transactions, so that your bulk of the money is safe. So even if you fall prey to one of these activities by mistake, you aren't going to face a heavy loss immediately.
Thank you so much, Samir, for highlighting these important points. It's always, good to be precautious and know all of this. Would you like to cover anything more?
So yeah, I have a couple of more slides, but since a lot of them is repetition of what we've spoken about, I'll quickly run through them, and then maybe if there's any more questions, we can take them at the end. Since we've covered UPI, this was just a quick example of how to create a UPI ID from an app like Paytm. Like you can see in the bottom square, it has the 705 and the rest of your phone number at Paytm. and it has your bank details, of course, because you need to link your bank account to UPI. So this was just a simple example for those that are interested in exploring UPI payments. It's very simple to create an ID using either your bank app or an app like Paytm or an app like Google Pay. We've also spoken about bank transfers and people who pay rent, for example, or who need to transfer a higher amount of money should use bank transfers. For bank transfers, you need, if you need to share your information with someone to transfer money via bank, this is a very simple example of the kind of information you need. You need your name, you need your address, you need your, the IFSC code of your bank account and the bank name. The beneficiary's phone number, like you see, there is no star next to it. So it's an optional thing. I recommend do not share your phone number for professional transactions if it's avoidable. It's just, even though you do share your phone number with people, it is advisable to only give the information which is important. So like I said, the IFSC code will help you identify the bank branch. Your account number is, of course, the account number in which you need the money to be transferred to, and your name as it appears on your bank details. So these are the simple information that one would need to transfer money to you, or you would need to transfer money to someone online. And bank transfers are usually safer. You have things like IMPS transfers, which happen fast. This is, of course, just a simple example of the kind of information you need to input when you are purchasing something from, let's say, Amazon, as an example. When you're using your credit or debit card, the information you generally need is your credit or debit card number, the expiry month and year for the card, and the CVV number. Now, the CVV number is the number that's at the back of your credit card, right below the magnetic strip. It's a 3-digit number. This information is never usually saved. However, you can and you should not save your card details online. I know it's a process, even for a service like Amazon. I'm not sure if you read in the news or were aware, about a year ago, Dunzo, the delivery service app, got hacked and some payment information of users was leaked. About 10 years ago, Sony's infrastructure was hacked, and their gaming console, the PlayStation, that online infrastructure of the PlayStation was hacked, and all the account information, including payment information of Sony's clients, was leaked online. There have been times when Zomato got hacked and the email IDs of its customers was also revealed online. So, and it's very difficult for you as a person to know whether your information was, one of the pieces of information that got hacked. There is an application called SafeMe. It's made by an Indian company called Lucidius. They have done a lot of work with security. You can always download this app and it will tell you what information of yours was exposed, right? So it's a great application to have, so you know when your information is exposed online. I would personally recommend, even if you're an avid online shopper, I probably use online shopping once a week, but I still manually input my card details every time because I don't want to save it there just in case it ever gets compromised. So keeping your debit or credit card number in a service is not advisable, even though it is convenient. So so those were the points that I had. And if you guys have any more questions, I'm here to take them.
We do have one question. So I am very skeptical to link my bank account with Paytm or Google Pay, as I have heard many fraudulent transactions happen once we do so. I use my credit card, but I get charged extra to do so. What do you suggest?
So, I mean, it's absolutely fair to be skeptical about using your bank account details with an app like Google Pay, Paytm. It's very right to be skeptical. You should be skeptical. Using a credit card will always have a certain level of service charges. There are some times when the bank will give you a credit card as a bonus offer and say, we will waiver off service charges for 1 year, which has happened to a lot of people. Using a credit card is also a little safer because if a fraud happens, then it's not your bank account's money that has been taken away, and the bank, may deal with it in a more serious way. However, I have been using both Google Pay and Paytm since the apps launched. And because I have been careful with all the steps that I just explained to you, I have never faced a fraud over there. Like I said, the first and the only fraud I have faced in my life was the debit card fraud, where it was just a transaction in a much, in a place where there were a lot of people. So there could have been a lapse in my judgment, which is why someone could clone my card and could also get a look at my PIN number. But like I said, for that situation, my backup safety net was that I use a secondary bank account, which I use for all my online shopping, for all my online transactions. And I know exactly how much money I have kept in the secondary small account, and it is not linked to my primary account. So while your skepticism is correct, you will, once you link your bank account to an app like Paytm and make certain payments, you will not be charged your charges, which are your credit card charges. And if you can take out the time to go and take these extra precautions of a secondary bank account, or maybe if you're just going to use Paytm, just topping up your Paytm wallet or your Amazon Pay, just topping up that service with the amount of money that you require, then you really don't need to link your debit card account with it, right? So if you are making, let's say, your IGL gas payment and your mobile bill payment and your broadband connection payment through Paytm, you could just top up the wallet once, do not save your card information so it's not there in Paytm once you've made the transaction, and then you're using the Paytm wallet money without being charged the extra charge that your credit card charges you.
Thank you, Samir. We have one more question. IMPS or NEFT or RTGS? What would you suggest?
So IMPS and NEFT usually happen almost immediately. I think it is RTGS, which is for the larger sum, if I'm not mistaken, for a transfer. Honestly, I have used IMPS for almost all transactions that I have made. I can give you examples because this is probably the same things that you use it for. I use IMPS to pay my rent. I use IMPS to transfer money between, if in case my parents need anything or my spouse needs, money in her account for whatever reason. Like I said, most of us do our transactions which are online related through an account which has a smaller balance. So if that bank account needs to be topped up for a transaction, IMPS is almost instant. I made the down payment for a car using RTGS because I needed to have more detailed information over there. But for day-to-day transactions, to transfer money between family members, to transfer money to, let's say, any payment that needs to be made, IMPS usually works fine. The level of security, because it is through your bank's app and through specific information that only you have, and you have to link the other person's account as a payee account, right? So if I need to transfer money to you, I need your name, your bank account number, the branch, the IFSC code. Only then will I be able to transfer the, excuse me, the money to you. So there is a difference. I'm not very clear on the absolute terms difference, but for everyday transactions, IMPS works perfectly fine.
Yeah, I agree. IMPS is way more convenient. Sometimes, but just a question, like a small one. IMPS is chargeable sometimes
I
in some bank accounts.
So it may be very specific to the bank, because with uh, the banks that I have dealt with, I have never been charged a charge for an IMPS transfer. So yeah, it could be very bank specific. I can tell you from using, let's say, for example, ICICI Bank, I have never been had a transaction charge for an IMPS transfer. And it's not like these transfers are 5 or 10 a month. I have gone up to 15, 20 transfers, intra-bank and interbank both. So yes, it could be very bank specific. Again, that's something that someone would have to check with their bank. I have never faced a charge for an IMPS transfer.
Okay, all right. So, Samir, I think here we come to an end with all the questions. If anybody still has any question, I would request them to put it in the chat box. Okay, I think we have Samir has answered all the questions, and people have really loved it. Again, you're getting compliments to say cheese
Thank
and
you.
digit for bringing this up. Many thanks. Look for some more soon. So thank you so much, Samir, for taking out the time and answering such critical and important questions on, payments and digital payments. This is a concern for everyone, and I'm sure that a lot of questions have been answered. I can say that because my questions have been answered. So thank you so much, Samir. We thank Digit for helping us and answering so many questions once again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And
Hello? Hello, Samir?
I think he's facing some technical issues.
Okay. Maybe we'll just hold on for a moment and Nabila, I think we can close the discussion and we'll extend our thanks to Samir once again after the session.
Sure, sure, Rajpreet. I thank each and everyone present here to be a part of this informative session today and taking out the time and being present. Thanks again. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., we have a workshop on PCOS, which will be delivered by Dr. Kulwant Singh. The information for which is available on our social media handles. We request you all to be present and make the most of it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.